Does anyone have any questions or comments regarding the consent agenda? Okay, hearing none. Mr. Guarino, could you please call the roll?
Can I interrupt you 1 second?
Yes.
Tara, can you let Stephen back in, please?
She just did. Thank you.
Oh, welcome, Mr. Norris. Thank you for coming back. Okay, so we just had a motion from Ms. Timmons to approve the consent agenda, seconded by Ms. Brown, and we're just about to call the roll.
On the motion to approve the consent agenda, Mr. Guarino votes yes. Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Dean? Ms. Zine? Yes. Okay, yes. Ms. Bishop?
Yes.
Ms. Gilio?
Yes.
Ms. Raymond?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Oden?
Yes.
Ms. Timmons?
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0.
Thank you, Mr. Guarino. So we have no items removed from the consent agenda. Does anyone have any communications outside the consent agenda this evening? Okay, seeing none. Superintendent comments. Dr. Mosley, do you have any comments for us this evening?
I'll have more to say a little later. I think we met on Thursday and not much has transpired since Thursday, since our last meeting. So I don't have anything that's new as of today, but thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Mosley. Does anyone have any response to that? Seeing no hands, I'm going to assume no. So the next item is student member of the board comments. Mr. Norris, did you have anything to share with us this evening?
Nothing really relating to the agenda, but there was one thing that a couple of people suggested to me. I don't know if this is in the board's wheelhouse or somewhere else, but a couple of high school students suggested that they maybe could get their parking permits either use the money they spent on this semester's parking permit towards next year, or if they could get some money off of it next year. I don't know if that's what we can do or anything, but it was just an idea that people were looking into because they weren't able to park for half the year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Norris. Dr. Mosley, you had your hand up.
Yes, I think Keith Richard and Nate Burns can figure something out to make something right with those individuals. My recommendation would be if you could just direct them to either, Keith and Nate and those, Mr. Burns and Mr. Richard, not just work it out for your friends, but to come up with something for the entire school. So for those kids who missed out. So I think that's a good, that's something we would certainly be willing to entertain, but that would just be for everyone as well.
So Dr. Mosley, should Mr. Norris write up a proposal and send it to the two principals? Or is that something where simply speaking it out loud at the board meeting, then they would look into it?
I guess you're at the north, Stephen. So my recommendation would be that we would do it at both schools, same policy, same procedure. So once you're done sending it to once you talk to Nate Burns, I'll reach out to both of them after this meeting and just let them know this is coming down the pike, and they'll send some information out to everyone. Does that make sense?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Does that answer? I'm sorry, Heather. I'm pointing here. I'm pointing because you're off to my left. So that's why I'm looking at you, but I don't think the board can see that.
That does make sense. I just wanted to make sure that we all understood that the next step is that Mr. Norris is going to write to both principals and say, I have an idea, and then they will look into it and get back.
Either way, okay.
Okay, great. Mr. Gao.
Thank you. I actually wanted to make a quick comment regarding the most recent decision the board made on the grading system. So at the moment, many students are struggling with the decision-making process and choosing, whether to go to pass-fail or keep the existing grades. People are worried that selecting pass or fail may be interpreted poorly by the colleges. So in response to this morning, I actually called 5 colleges to see how they feel, hopefully alleviate some of the concerns of my students. But unfortunately, what I found wasn't amazing. I said to them, as you know, many high schools in the nation are changing the way students are graded during this pandemic. So recently, particularly our school district has decided to give students the option of to whether choose the standard system or the pass-fail system. Of course, these are times of high stress, and I said, from what I hear, the colleges understand that pass-fail maybe have a lot of, or a student choosing pass-fail is going through a lot, and therefore that colleges will not punish the students for choosing the pass-fail option. However, the caveat is, though, I asked, will perhaps if a student discloses their grade, their standard grades, and manages to maintain high levels of excellence, will they be rewarded and held to an advantage? And unfortunately, most of the responses were very, very vague. Two of the five schools I called, BU and Princeton, have not even decided how they're going to respond to this. MIT particularly said that they're taking a holistic approach to the application, meaning if a student selects pass or fail, they would like to know why. Whether it is through the essay, or they may even call the school guidance counselor to ask about a particular student. If they find that the student is selecting the pass fail to kind of coast, or just to have the rest of the year off easy, then the student's application will rarely be accepted. In other words, what this kind of means is that students should only select pass or fail if they're being impacted negatively by the pandemic. And what's really unclear here is to what extent, in this day and age, we really cannot deny the psychological impacts, I suppose, brought by online learning in this pandemic. So just this uncertainty is a bit disheartening. Good news, though, was that Dartmouth and Cornell, the admissions counselors there, said that they will do their best to treat students equally. However, there may be some complications in it. So essentially, the potential of colleges viewing a student's pass-fail grade negatively, this honestly may eliminate the viability of selecting pass-fail grading for select individuals, which acts as a large impetus for stress or anxiety during these difficult times, ultimately destroying the intended belief or the intended benefit of pass-fail grading. So to be honest, I know I mentioned this last board meeting, but all these issues have one simple solution, which is to move the decision-making from the individual level to the class level, preventing colleges from singling out these select students and forcing them to truly treat students equally. Personally, I'm not affected by this decision. However, I know many of my friends and classmates are. So I just wanted to share this with the board. Ultimately, what you all decide to do with this, I respect, but I want to just kindly ask again for the board to consider changing the decision for grading from the individual in the individual level to the class level to kind of alleviate some of the stress.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gao. I think the decision last week was a difficult one for many of us. So I think we need to see how this plays out a little bit more before we think about changing our opinions again. But I appreciate the feedback, and I think it's important that we continue to get feedback as the semester goes on. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay. The committee on budget. Mr. Guarino, do you have something?
No, what happened?
Oh, there you are. Mr. Guarino, you're on mute.
Oh, is this for the budget committee? I'm sorry.
Yes, I understand that the budget
yeah.
committee did some work this weekend.
Yes, we did. We passed the 2.25. Hold you there for a minute. We passed the 2.25% budget, and we voted to send it to the mayor and alderman. So, and I think that's all we have to, unless someone else has anything.
Okay, well, thank you all for that. I apologize for not being there. And we will see what the city says. Mr. Donovan, which is the date that the district actually goes to the city to discuss our budget at their meeting?
It is Tuesday, May 19th at 6:30.
Thank you. Tuesday. at 6:30. So everybody is welcome to come and observe that process.
Yes.
So, yes. Ms. Johnson?
Okay, so where is this going to be held since we're at, still a stay at home, social distancing? So is this going to be in the where for us, anybody to come?
It will be held at the city auditorium. There's a limited number of people that can go there. I'm sure it will also be on Zoom. We can get more details on that.
Okay, thank you. That brings up a question as well. On our calendar, our meetings for later in May are scheduled currently to be at North as opposed to via Zoom. So at some point, the board needs to talk about that and decide what they want to do. I don't think we need to decide this evening. I think we can decide next week. But it's something that I want people to have in their minds as the state begins to reopen. How does the Board of Education feel about, going back to business as usual? So that's that. On the Committee on Finance and Operations, I don't see anything. Ms. Oden, do you have anything for us this evening?
No, we don't have anything until May 11th. We have a Finance and Operations meeting, I believe 6:30 by
Okay.
Zoom.
All right, thank you. And then Ms. Bishop, is there anything from policy that we missed?
No, we didn't have a policy meeting.
Okay. Correct. Go ahead.
No, I was just raising my hand. I just want to, this week, just about finance and operations, and if Dan wants to jump in, he can. I think we're going to find out a little bit more money on this CARES Act. It's still very vague at this point from where the money's coming from, particularly. I know it's coming from the federal government down to the state, and what that can and cannot be used from. So as soon as we get that information, we'll share it with the board, but just more FYI at this point.
Thank you, Dr. Mosley. I think that's important. Do you think you'll have information in time for the May 11th meeting?
I actually think what I'm told, again, and please, I'm told that there's going to be some type of webinar or information given to the superintendents. I believe it's either on that 10th or the 11th. So I during my superintendent's conference meeting last week on Friday, we're still waiting for those invitations to be officially sent out. Originally it was on the 7th, then the state backed it out to the 10th. So I believe it's either going to be on the 10th or the 11th. Either way, as soon as I get that information, I'll send it to the board and to the finance, and Dan will also be part of that as well. I also, we're also, just to your point, Madam President, that we're, in terms of reopening and where we're at a little bit, certainly the governor has issued this reopening 2.0 and put some strict limitations on some reopening endeavors. At this point, it does not involve the schools that much in terms of reopening the schools. I think the conversation that we need to have, because the school year is done, but certainly reaching out to our summer school programs and figuring out exactly what that feels and looks like for our kids. I feel like I'm covering my mouth. I think I was on my icon there. So, we'll certainly keep everyone abreast as we start to wind down the year.
Thank you, Dr. Mosley. That's another item that we'll have to have on a future agenda is maybe next week or the week after, is the summer school plans. Okay, so Committee on Curriculum and Evaluation, do you have anything tonight?
Nothing to report. We've got a meeting next week, I think.
Oops, sorry about that. I like to take notes while we're doing our meeting, and so sometimes I get lost in my note taking. So the next item on the agenda is the Committee on Human Resources. It occurs to me that the teacher renominations are under new business, but they could be heard under the Committee on Human Resources. Does anyone have any objection to doing the personnel recommendations and then moving up the teacher renominations? Miss Brown has her hand up.
I was just curious if there was anything that we were questioning on the personnel recommendations. Shouldn't we move? Could we move that into non-public before we make our final vote?
Yes, if there's any questions or quibbles about personnel, it should be done in non-public. I am not sure how ETV would like to handle going into non-public and then coming out of it. So I'm going to say that out loud, and hopefully Mr. Johnson is listening and can tell me what to do. Go ahead, Miss Brown.
I was going to recommend that we leave it to new business, and we could kind of move it. That way we can leave it all the way to the end of the meeting, and it might make it easier to tag it on in the end in case there was anything else.
Okay, Dr. Mosley?
Are we, just clarifying, are we going into do board members have questions about the renomination, and is there a non-public that's necessary for the renomination?
I think that is what Ms. Brown is saying, is that there are some questions that are best answered in non-public.
Okay.
Just to, protect people.
Okay.
So in that case, I withdraw my suggestion that we move it up. So we want to be fair to everyone. So Ms. Timmons, I guess it's just personnel recommendations.
Okay, yes, I'd like to move to approve personnel recommendation dated May 4th, 2020.
Second that.
Okay. Is there any public discussion regarding the personnel recommendations from this evening? Ms. Brown?
I did have one question on the personnel recommendation list, which is why I would like to move it into non-public to talk about, but at the board's decision. Thank you.
Okay, so hang on one. Oops.
Could we table it until we come back out of non-public?
We could, although I just want to make sure we're talking about the same thing. The personnel recommendations is 5 items.
Mhm.
I'm sorry, I apologize. I misunderstood. I withdraw my, I was looking at the wrong document. I apologize. It's the 5 at the top of that sheet.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Thank you. I was confused at the documentation. I withdraw my argument.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
All right, that sounds reasonable. And I apologize to everybody. I tried to do things digitally this evening and not print out all those pages, and I'm not doing a good job of toggling back and forth between my documents and my Zoom screen. Okay, so Ms. Timmons has made a motion to approve the May 4th personnel recommendations, those 5 items. And is there any other questions or comments on that page?
I have a question. I have 6 items.
It is 6 items.
Oh, you're right. It is 6 items.
Okay.
I apologize. I can't count, apparently. It's been a very long day today. All right. Mr. Guarino, can you take the roll on Ms. Timmons' motion?
Okay, on the motion to approve the May 4th personnel recommendations, Mr. Guarino votes yes. Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Ziem?
Yes.
Ms. Bishop?
Yes.
Ms. Gilio?
Yes.
Ms. Raymond?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Oden?
Yes.
Ms. Timmons?
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0.
Okay, great. Thank you. Are there any liaison reports this evening? Seeing none, I do have one question for Dr. Mosley, and that is regarding the Ed Council. We did have a meeting scheduled for later this month, and I'm curious if that meeting is still going to go forth using Zoom, or if it ought to be canceled. And you don't have to answer it right now, but you're here, so I thought I'd ask you.
We'll send out a Zoom and we'll send out a Zoom invitation, get it scheduled. Sure. I don't see why not.
Okay, great. I think it's scheduled for the 22nd, but I don't have my calendar right in front of me. All right.
No problem.
Okay. So the next item on the agenda is the remote learning attendance. If someone could speak to that, I would appreciate it.
Why don't I turn it over to Dr. McKinney? He can tell you how that feels like at the elementary school, and then we'll turn it over to Donna Fitzpatrick, and she can talk about it at the secondary level. Dr.
Okay.
McKinney?
Thank you.
So I believe you have access to a document that shows the average daily attendance percentages at the elementary level. So we have pretty good attendance overall. I still think there are some challenges with certain populations of students, and we're continuing to reach out to them and engage them. And now over the last, it's only Monday, only today, I've gotten some questions around with New Hampshire opening up some of their businesses and guidelines. We're trying to make accommodations and be flexible for parents who may be engaging in employment again or opening up a small business. So we're trying to, again, be flexible, be understanding, be accommodating. But all in all, I'm pleased with the level of engagement at the elementary level. Hasn't been easy, but we're continuing to work on it. So with that, I'll pass it to Mrs. Fitzpatrick.
Can I ask a question, Dr. McKinney? I didn't see the attendance information for the elementary schools, or even an aggregate of all the elementary schools together in our packet this week. Do you know if attendance has substantially changed during remote learning?
Ms. Kinsella is raising her hand. Go ahead.
So we didn't get it till this morning, so it is not in your packets. And I apologize. I think I may have forgotten to forward it to you. I can try to see if I can get it to display, but it'll take me a couple minutes.
That's all right, Ms. Kinsella. I think I would like to see it just to see what the changes, to give us a better idea of how the pandemic is affecting our students, especially when it comes to access to education. So I'm sorry, Ms. Fitzpatrick, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Can I just speak to that before we transition?
That would be great.
So if you just look at the 12 elementary schools, we go from 99% attending from the beginning of remote instruction till now. And then on the low end, we have 83% of the kids attending and participating. So, a high percentage of our students are engaged. The highest percent absent is 15, 17% around some of our more challenging schools, engaging some kids, and certainly pockets of ELL and special education students. But, all in all, I would say, upper 80, 90% of our kids are participating on a regular basis.
And so you're saying that 80 to 90% are still participating afterwards?
Yes, this report runs from March 23rd, the very beginning of remote, till May 1st, so Friday.
Okay, great. So it's comparable to before?
Yeah, this is pretty good. We've been chasing them down. It's not easy, but we're staying on them.
Okay.
Ms. Raymond, I have a question for Dr. McKinney.
Go ahead, please, Dottie.
Okay, thank you. I know at the high schools, from talking to Dr. Mosley, we're using the SROs to try to connect with those kids that are absent, especially those that are frequent flyers, I guess. Who is checking on the elementary students? Who's reaching out to them who are not going to school on a continuous basis?
Same process at the elementary school. We are using some of the SROs or a designee from the PD department. Our attendance officer is also involved, but it's been all hands on deck: homeschool liaisons, guidance counselors, social workers. So everybody's been involved. The biggest challenge certainly is when we have newcomers to the district, and if you're not familiar with some of our platforms, Google Classroom, a Chromebook, and you speak another language, that has been challenging to resolve. But so we're trying just about everything. I say the process is the same, but certainly the scenarios that get thrown our way are not the same.
Thank you. And I can understand that. Let me ask, how successful are we when we reach out and find somebody at the home and are able to talk to them? Has that been successful?
Yeah, there are definitely some success stories. With social distancing, we've been able to kind of walk through some of the things that are needed to get people online. We've done some dual trainings with, having the Chromebook and then using like FaceTime or Skype and walking through it. So we've done everything from replace a hot water heater to, getting newcomers online at preschool and kindergarten. So there's a list of successes that we've made through a difficult time, I would say.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. McKinney. Does anyone else have any questions about elementary school before we move on to Ms. Fitzpatrick? I don't see anybody else. So Ms. Fitzpatrick, can you please walk us through the middle school?
I think you received the documents and it showed the attendance rate pre-corona and post-corona for the same length of time. And there's been a slight drop in attendance, but it's not catastrophic in my opinion. And a lot of what Dr. McKinney said that we've done for outreach is very similar at the middle and high school. We also have guidance counselors reaching out to students. We've had some success with the person that is our truancy officer reaching out to families, and we've got the ELL students are being reached by folks that either speak a similar language or have helped to get them set up with translation through different programs. But generally, I think you can see the numbers in front of you. I mean, it would be wonderful if we maintain 92 to 98% attendance. But I think in light of everything that's going on, 86 to 88% attendance isn't awful. It's not great, but it's not awful.
Any questions on middle school? Ms. Johnson?
Thank you. So the students that we're not able to reach out to, what's going to happen at the end of the year with these students?
Well, actually, that's a great question. Right now, the coaches, the curriculum liaisons are working actually both with Dr. McKinney and I to make plans to do PD over the summer over developing assessments to see where the kids are so that we will be able to adjust a curriculum and support those students in a way that where their gaps are, we're going to be able to catch them up, but not repeat things that don't need to be repeated. And we're right now just starting to meet on creative ways to help these students get back on track and be able to move forward successfully. But that process has just started, so I don't have details.
So these students won't be kind of staying in the same grade. They would move to the next grade with support, basically. That's kind of what I'm understanding.
Can I just interject? What ideally what we'd like to see for these kids is, number one, I think this came up in our discussion last week, some type of remediation program for these kids, particularly at the end of the school year. As I mentioned earlier, or the meetings have kind of all been clustered together. So we do have our Power Scholar program that we've run in the summer that is at the middle school level as well. And so, sometimes we ask kids to be candidates for these programs. In this case, if these kids do not show because of absenteeism or for whatever reason, that we would gently, guidely, I don't think that's a word, politely ask them to attend this program, with the understanding that if you attend and do a passing and you do well in this program, whatever format it's in, that you would be, have an opportunity to recover credit or course credit. As I said earlier, this is a pandemic, and we got to be flexible, and we've got to use creative ways to make sure that our kids get what they need. I think there's been a number of board members who have said that they're concerned about regression. And I say regression, not just regular regression, but regression in this environment. So anything, we're going to go the extra mile to make sure that these kids get some type of summer intervention because they need it, and make sure that we can identify those kids. So the sooner the better. Nothing's perfect, but they're certainly on our radar. And as I shared with the board earlier, that there are some kids that have gone, radio silence on us for various reasons, and we continue to do multiple reach outs to those families as well. And those, for a variety of reasons, they haven't made connections with us. And certainly, if they need resources that are beyond the schools, we've connected them to those resources as well. Our primary purpose when we reach out to these families is to make sure that they have food, make sure that they have all those types of provisions, and then we start to do the academics and reaching out to them. Some of our families, they need some health services as well, and some of their families are sick and they don't know what to do. And do they call their doctor? Do they leave? Do they self-quarantine? So we also serve as a liaison to working with the Department of Health here in the city. And the city Department of Health notifies us as well of those families who are actually affected by the COVID-19 and also need that level of support, and families who also might be affected by the COVID-19 that might need some support. So it's kind of a two-way street there.
Can I follow up on that, please?
Yes, please.
Okay, so here's the question, I guess. So these families that we can't get in touch with, and these children are failing, what I'd like to see some type of plan in place that, because if we can't get a hold of them, then what are we going to do to make sure these kids advance and we get them caught up? Because if they can't get to the next grade because they're far enough behind, there has to be a plan in place. And if they're not going now and we can't get them into a summer school program, then we have more problems with them re-entering the school in the fall for the next grade. So there has to be some type of plan in place. And that's what my biggest concerns are, that these kids that we can't get a hold of, the family, it's like AOL. And if they're not going now and we can't get them into summer school, there has to be a plan in place for the fall for them so they don't fall further behind. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. I suppose, one moment, please, Mr. Gao. I suppose there's two parts to that, because the first part is concern about their current well-being and their welfare, where I would think if we have people who have completely dropped off the radar, we might want to involve, calling DCYF and having a social worker go out and check and make sure that they're okay, and that they haven't moved away or something. And then, I'm sorry, Dr. Mosley?
No, I said some have moved away, some, and we have been involved. DCYF, DCYF, the police, as Garth said earlier, our homeless liaison coordinators, our guidance counselors.
Okay. So I was going to say the other part of it is, I think maybe what Ms. Johnson is alluding to is coming up with a district-wide plan for, are there going to be extension classes? Are there going to be some sort of remedial help for students who would have passed based on, their records had the pandemic not happened? And so I think that's something that ought to be looked into and considered very seriously. So I saw some hands. I saw Mr. Gao. Did I see you, Ms. O'Gara? Maybe. All right. Let's start.
Yes.
All right. So let's
just going to add the truant officer to that list of people who check on the students.
Oh, thank you, Ms. O'Gara. Mr. Gao, thank you for your patience.
Thank you. I'm just kind of curious. My questions kind of goes along with what you were saying, Ms. Raymond. Like, why typically are these students not able to come to the classes? What's like the majority reason, if we know?
I think that there's a wide variety of reasons why students don't participate. And frankly, even when school is in session and we're there every day, there's certain students that we have trouble engaging, and we use lots of methods to get them engaged. I think that with the pandemic and people, regardless of how hard our school staff is reaching out, that it's just a difficult situation, and that we try our best to engage them. But even when school is in session, some families and students struggle with engaging in school. I did want to address Ms. Johnson. We are coming up with a plan, and we were talking at middle school and high school is coming up with a plan, including summer school, which is going to be happening this year. And we're going to, and competency recovery. So there are plans in the works, but nothing is codified yet. And so it would be, I would be remiss if I came forward and said specifically what the plans were, because we're in the process. And part of that planning has to involve teachers. They have to have a voice in this. And so we have started the process, and we will have a plan going into the fall. And so for those students that we can't, for whatever reason, get engaged in summer school, we will have a plan moving forward. However, we spent the first several weeks getting set up and comfortable with remote learning, and then a couple of weeks pulling people in that were not connecting, either because of language barriers or computer issues or connectivity issues. So that was our focus for a few weeks. Now we are moving forward to focus on what are we going to do in the fall? How are we going to help these kids? And what are we going to do to help them be as successful as possible and move forward?
Thank you, Ms. Fitzpatrick. I'm relieved to hear that. And I'm wondering if that's something that will come to a curriculum committee meeting. And I saw Dr. McKinney's hand waving.
I was just going to say, some of our committees are still meeting. Like today, we met with the Mass Steering Committee. So we are working on plans for addressing these kind of learning gaps. So some of the three things that came out of that meeting was identifying priority standards, the ones that are like all kids must know, developing some pre-assessments so we can find out where the gaps are and remediate those, and modifying our pacing guides for instruction so teachers have a little more time to fill in those gaps. So we're working on it. We don't have a final product. It's just the beginning of May, but those thoughts and conversations are happening. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. McKinney. Ms. Johnson, does that answer your question?
I think so. As long as we have a plan in place between now and the fall to rescue some of these students that need it, I think that's very important. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. There, I finally fixed it. I did have a question about the middle school numbers, or maybe just like a commentary. It's interesting to me, as I was looking at the 3 middle schools, that it looks like we had a drop of like 6% in 2 of them, but in one of them, the average attendance actually went up almost a percentage point, which I thought was really interesting, that there might be some students who are perhaps more engaged or more apt to log on, being able to do it remotely. Have we gotten any feedback from teachers about that?
As a matter of fact, both at the middle and high school, we've gotten reports from teachers. Would you stop? I'm sorry, I'm being interrupted.
All right, let's give Ms. Fitzpatrick a minute.
I apologize. We have had several teachers reach out and say that they actually have students that are flourishing in the remote environment. And so we do have success stories around that. And I think that that probably is some of that attendance that you're seeing, is that some kids are really enjoying and learning well from the remote environment.
Thank you, Ms. Fitzpatrick. I saw Miss Brown. I saw Mr. Norris. Did I see you, Miss Giglio? No, Miss Brown did not want to speak. So it's to you, Mr. Norris.
I actually talked to a teacher as well, and they actually suggested that some of their students actually enjoyed online learning more because they were able to log on at a later time, so they didn't have to get up at 6:30 in the morning and walk into class at 7:20 and then have to sit there for an hour and 15 minutes. They could wake up at 10 and then do all their work then. So,
Miss Brown.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Mr. Norris. That's a good observation. And actually, it's something that I'd like to put on the curriculum and evaluation committee agenda in the near future, is how we're kind of doing some outreach for these students that really are enjoying and flourishing in the remote learning process. I mean, maybe those are the perfect candidates for VLAX or those extra classes that are primarily take place remotely. So thank you for pointing that out. And I think that would be a great place where we could maybe engage those students on a better note. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. That actually makes me think I have another question regarding middle school. I understand that at one point in time, we were offering algebra to 8th graders or possibly also 7th graders, but it was teacher recommended. And I'm wondering how, or there was a test, I don't remember, but I'm wondering how that's going to work with the remote learning situation.
We actually were dealing with that, and a letter is going to go out to parents, and the parents will have the opportunity to opt into grading for world language and algebra 1, because the standard is a B- and teacher recommendation. If students go with a pass-fail, it will be strictly teacher recommendation about whether or not they're ready for the next level. So I've been meeting with the principals and communicating with those teachers, and we're going to be putting something out to parents. Originally for high school, it was May 11th. I think we're going to extend that for middle school, so parents of middle school students in world language and algebra 1 have a little bit longer to make a decision. But that is something that impacts those students specifically. The rest of the students are pass-fail, and the algebra students can choose pass-fail, and the teacher would be at that point making a recommendation. Was that pass a 95 or was that pass a 72?
And so how does that affect students who want to get into those classes, who are perhaps, I don't know now, 6th graders or 7th graders who wanted to take algebra 1 or a world language?
Yeah, that the world language, excuse me, a letter goes out to students that are being recommended for world language. That doesn't mean it's the only students that can register for it, but a letter of recommendation does go out from the department heads at the high school of the world language departments. And then students are registered that way. The principals are the ones that set up the schedules. So all of that will be happening in the next few weeks, where those letters would be going out. And the algebra students, it's the same thing for moving into 8th grade through teacher recommendation. And I think that although 7th grade would be a pass-fail, the teacher recommendation and the grades for the first 2 trimesters will be weighted much more heavily.
Thank you. Dr. Mosley?
I certainly, again, there'll be publication on what that feels and looks like. I think your question, and maybe Ms. Raymond, if you just clarify a little bit, you kind of, and I'm just listening, I believe you want to know that how would a student who might be eligible to go into algebra 1 or 2, what's that process look like? Is that what your question is gearing towards? How do parents find that out?
Yeah, kind of, because I've gotten a couple of questions about that, because I am a parent of a middle schooler, so people tend to ask me that, questions about middle school, and I don't know. So I figured I'd ask here.
Sure. I think that's a great,
And I think that Ms. Fitzpatrick just answered the question.
Okay.
Yeah, unless there's more details
No.
that you think we should know.
The only thing I do know is that for individuals new to, let's say you come from a community from Massachusetts and you come into our middle schools, they typically do give you an assessment because they don't have those teacher recommendations to go off of, and so that's one process as well. We've had kids who have improved their math. I hate to use skills, but their repertoire, aptitude, whatever you want to call it. And so sometimes what happens is that parents will come and have a discussion with the guidance counselor and with the math teacher to talk about placement and trial as well. So, a lot of those things take place. We're still going to do them. It's just taking a lot longer because of the remote learning platform here. But certainly all that will take place.
Thank you, Dr. Mosley. I think that's it's a valid point that you make, that we can't, in days past, you could set up an appointment with the principal and talk to them. But now parents who are interested, I would say in the middle school and the high school level, if they have questions, to contact the principals of those schools, and then via email probably would be best, right? And then go
Right.
forward
If
that
they're
way.
I don't know the principal schedules. They are there some days, but usually if you want to have a discussion, they'll be available. And by also leaving an email, I know some principals will contact you from their homes. So that's another, the immediacy is there. Certainly, they use the recommendations of the teachers. Ultimately, we like to have the parents' feedback as well in terms of the individual student placement as well. I think that's fair too.
Thank you, Dr. Mosley. I really appreciate both of you taking the time to answer those kind of off the cuff questions that I didn't know I had until just now. Ms. Fitzpatrick, I think we're ready to move on to high school unless anyone has any other middle school questions. I'm looking around all my screens and I don't see any hands. So if you could do high school, please.
I think that you'll see with high school that we have similar results, that the attendance is okay. They did the pre-pandemic 6-week window and then post-pandemic 6-week window. And the students that we're struggling with are the same at elementary and middle school. Kids that tend to be a little bit more disenfranchised, either because of language barriers, which we've told you the reasons or the ways that we're trying to reach out to those people. And also we're making plans for competency recovery for students, and also summer school, which a letter is ready to go out. It's going to be posted on the website, but we're offering summer school. And one of the things that we're doing for students is we're offering extended learning opportunities and work studies as a way for students to get credits that maybe lost a credit during this time. So we're finding lots of different ways to support students so that they're able to move forward. There also today, there was discussion around how it's going to look at high school in terms of if we're going to have a remediation class, extension classes. Those conversations are taking place. The other piece that I should have mentioned in middle school is one of the models that we started to use last year that addresses more students is we've been having the interventionists push into the classroom so that there's actually 2 teachers, and one of them is an interventionist doing work with students that really need the extra help. But that allows the student to be in the class with their peers and also get the extra help. And we're looking at an intervention model moving forward because we think that may be the way to support the most students the most effectively. But again, these are all conversations, as Dr. McKinney said, that are taking place right now.
Can you give us a little bit more information about what an interventionist does? Because I am not familiar with that at all.
An interventionist is somebody who their specialty is in scaffolding the information so students can access it more easily. So, for example, they may break a problem down in math. They may break a problem down to each step and show the process and have the students show the process and work with them in a way that they're more able to access the curriculum because of the way it's broken down for them and explained to them. But it's the same curriculum, but presented a little differently. And also scaffolded so they do what they can do, and then they are part of the regular classroom, so they get exposure to the curriculum, but at the same time, the focus is on what they need to improve on. Does that help?
Yes, it does. Thank you. It's actually really interesting and cool. So thank you for providing that explanation.
You're welcome.
Did anyone have any questions about attendance at the high school levels? I
don't have a question about the attendance, but I would like to ask Dr. McKinney if there's been any thought about having elementary teachers loop so that they have the same students that they had this year for up until March, and they would go up a grade level and keep that same class so they knew the students and knew some of their strengths and weaknesses. Has there been any consideration to offering more teachers the chance to loop with their class?
There has been some discussion. We have a principals meeting tomorrow. I was hoping to discuss it more. Obviously, there's a benefit to doing that for the students. But for some of our teachers at some grade levels, we do have a learning curve that would be presented and learning the new curriculum at a different grade level. So some are suggesting that we look to kind of package, say we're doing geometry, and we package, and you're teaching third and fourth grade standards together so that kids have the option of demonstrating understanding not only within the grade level or a grade level above or below.
Miss O, that a question?
Yes, I'm fine at this point.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. McKinney. Will we see any of these plans at curriculum meetings coming up in the future?
It's a possibility, working on next week's agenda, but in June, so kind of take it one thing at a time. Certainly it is a challenge. I would say right now, things take a little longer in this kind of remote virtual environment. So doing class placement and transitions is a process underway. So it may be into the summer. But again, going back to what I said before, having pacing, flexibility, and pre-assessments at the beginning of the year, teachers are saying that's going to be kind of one of the tools in our disposal to kind of address some of these learning gaps.
Thank you, Dr. McKinney. I do not expect it next week, but I would like it before September. That would be cool. So thank you for all your hard work on it. Okay, do we have any other questions regarding remote learning attendance at all? I don't see any hands, so let's move on to hours versus days and an update on what that looks like. Dr. Mosley, did you wish to speak to this?
I do. There's some things that I would, because there's contracts, Ms. Raymond, that it would be better to do it in non-public because there is some contractual information that we have to discuss. So I do have some things to share with the board just around that. So I think there's a non-public coming up. So I'd like to have that discussion, and then we can come out of non-public so that I can give that information to you, and then the board can decide on some things.
Okay, as long as we can provide the public with some answers to those questions before we leave this evening, or at least that we're moving in that direction, I would appreciate it. All right, so hours versus days is non-public now, and then back to public. And then the teacher renominations, we've asked for a non-public. Was there any other business before the board or that any member needed to bring up this evening? I don't see any hands. Oh, Ms. Oden?
I'm sorry. For those teachers, I don't know how long the non-public is going to be, but it is Teacher Appreciation Week. And our teachers have never worked so many hours with this new platform. I haven't spoken to one teacher that hasn't said it's hard to believe how many more hours they're putting in. Matter of fact, one teacher said it was like being a first-year teacher all over again. And I can remember my first year over 50 years ago, and I remember it probably as vividly as my last year. And I have something I'd like to read to all the teachers. It was never the teachers. The schools are broken, they said. It must be the teachers, they said. And so they came for us. They gave us scripted curriculum so we would know what to teach. Creativity and individuality couldn't be trusted. They imposed state testing so we would know how well we taught. Otherwise, we might just sit at our desks all day. They demanded SMART goals and evaluations so that we would constantly improve. Without them, we would never strive to get better. We were monitored, we were graded, we were told we were lacking. And then the world shut down. Get rid of the standardized tests, they cried, and they did. They dropped the scripted curriculum, the SMART goals, the evaluations. And you know what? The teachers are still teaching. They're using Legos to teach arrays and cookie recipes to teach fractions. They're infusing creativity and passion. They're staying up all night researching new ways of teaching. They're connecting with students like never before. Students are begging to go to school. Families are coming together to learn. No testing, no curriculum, no evaluations. And maybe, just maybe, the problem wasn't teachers after all. So to all of our teachers, thank you, and we recognize the extra work you are doing to make this successful for our students. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Oden. That was lovely. That makes me.
I didn't write that. Somebody sent that to me.
So on that note, I wonder if the board wanted to do board member comments, if anyone else had any comments this evening before we go into non-public. Yes, Ms. Johnson.
Yeah, I'm going to bring up this graduation again because my husband and I took a little ride on Friday just to get away. We were up in North Conway area, and I was listening to the radio that Laconia High School is doing graduation, and the students are walking. And I believe they're doing it in a field or stadium. And, you know, I did have a chance to speak with Miss Bagley. I was speaking to her about another issue, and I kind of brought this up to her. You know, and this is an important time. If in fact we could have the military graduate from West Point and they did it right, you mean to tell me Nashua can't do it 6 feet on the sections of Holman Stadium and Stellos? I'd be more than happy to go out there and supervise and make sure people are 6 feet and make sure this goes off. And I'm really upset about this. And a parent questioned again, and I brought this up on the 23rd of April. Kind of got shot down, you know, because I felt that it should have been brought to the board where there was such a big change about the graduation. This is a once in a lifetime for these students. You know, doing it virtually is not the same as not doing it. It can be done outside in a safe environment. The governor's starting to relax to stay at home. And I think that we could have done this and done it right for these students, because we're telling to bring them back in August. August isn't going to be the same. Students might not be able to come back. They could have joined the military. They could be packing up to go to school. There's factors here. And, you know, I wish this would have been brought to the board, because the plan that I talked about is viable, is durable. 2 guest limit, 6 feet, every other seat, every other row. Could have done 2 or 3 graduations, as many as had to be on a Saturday, 2 Saturdays, 3 Saturdays, 4 graduations on the weekend. And us as a board could have worked together as a team and helped become ushers at this graduation. And, you know, I think it's important. And I wish that it just wasn't kind of shuffled under the rug so quickly, and we could have had a conversation about this. But I'll tell you something, if I was a parent of a student in this district that my child was graduating, I'd kind of be a little bit upset. They worked their whole life to get to this point. And you could give them a diploma. The principal could be wearing gloves, give the diploma in plastic. It could have been done. It could have been done, and we didn't do it. And I guess my answer is shame on us as a board. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Johnson, for sharing your thoughts on graduation. Did anyone else have any board comments before we go into our non-public? I'm not seeing any hands. With that, I do want to echo Ms. Oden saying thank you to our teachers on Teacher Appreciation Week. I know that my children's teachers have been posting to Google Classroom at all hours of the day and night. So I know that they are not keeping a traditional schedule, and I'm sincerely grateful for that. So thank you. And then I think the next thing is to figure out how we do a non-public. Ms. Kinsella?
Yep, I could easily put the student reps if they want to stay. I can put them in the waiting room. We can put ETV in the waiting room. ET will put up their normal, we're in a non-public and we will be back. And then we can let, come back when you've made your decisions. Does that work?
Okay, that works. So I guess I am looking for a motion to go into non-public under, I would say, RSA 91. Who's talking?
Was it me?
Was it you? I was just, we're all talking at the same time. Did someone?
I think the last time we went into verse
3, it's either C or A or both. So would someone like to make that motion?
So moved.
Okay. Which do we decide, C and A or just C?
Well, we can do C and A. That covers both areas.
Okay.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Guarino. Any discussion about going into non-public?
Wait, so are we coming back together after this or not?
Yes. So the plan is that we would go into non-public to have the personnel discussion, and then hopefully that won't take too long. And then we'll come back out of non-public and make any motions that need to be made in public, because the motions have to be public regarding personnel. And then also we put days and hours to happen after the non-public. So that would be the plan. So y'all welcome to wait. We could, I don't know how to contact you guys when we're done to have you come back in. So it would probably be best to just leave it up.
I could just put them, I can put them in the waiting room and I can just wait.
Just wait. You don't necessarily have to like sit at your computer and stare at it. You can wander about and check. It's all right. Usually these things take like at least half an hour. Okay, Mr. Gao?
Unfortunately, I do have a prior commitment, so I think I will just be heading out. But thank you so much for a wonderful meeting.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, Mr. Gao. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
You as well. Bye-bye.
Okay, so we have a motion to go into non-public. We need to do a roll call.
Okay, on the motion to go into non-public, Mr. Guarino votes yes. Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Ziem? Yes. Yes.
Ziem is indicating yes.
Ms. Bishop?
Yes.
Ms. Gilio?
Yes.
Ms. Raymond?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Oden?
Yes.
Ms. Timmons?
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0. We are in non-public 6:38 p.m.
Okay, excellent. Okay, folks, it is 7:29 p.m. and we are back in public session. I would entertain a motion to seal the minutes of the non-public session.
So moved.
Oh my goodness, I didn't hear who was first. I think Ms. Timmons, seconded by Ms. Ziem. Mr. Guarino, could you call the roll at your convenience?
On the motion to seal the minutes, Mr. Guarino votes yes. Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Ms. Ziem,
Yes.
yes. Ms. Bishop,
Yes.
Ms. Gilio,
Yes.
Ms. Raymond,
Yes.
Ms. Brown,
Yes.
Ms. Oden,
Yes.
Ms. Timmons.
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0. The minutes are sealed, 7:30 PM.
Thank you very much, Mr. Guarino. At this time, I am looking for a motion regarding approving the 2020-2021 teacher renominations.
I'd like to approve 2021 teachers not a renomination for teachers and principals dated May 4th, 2020.
Second.
Do we have any discussion regarding that motion? Seeing none?
Could
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ms. Oden.
I'm sorry, could I please say I have to abstain from this to avoid a conflict of interest?
Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Oden. Okay, Mr. Guarino, could you please call the roll?
Okay, on the motion to approve the teacher renominations, Mr. Guarino votes yes. Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
May I correct you on that? It's the teachers and principals.
I'm sorry, teachers and principals renominations for the year 2021. Mr. Guarino, yes. Ms. Johnson said yes.
Yes.
Ms. Ziem,
Yes.
Ms. Bishop,
Yes.
Ms. Gilio,
Yes.
Ms. Raymond,
Yes.
Ms. Brown,
Yes.
Ms. Oden,
Abstain.
abstained, Ms. Timmons.
Yes.
Motion carries 8 in favor, 0 against, and 1 abstention.
Thank you, Mr. Guarino. And the last item this evening is regarding hours versus days and not, well, I guess when we meet state requirements for the year. Oh, did anyone want to speak on that? Ms. Ziem?
I'd like to make a motion so that everybody will know. I make a motion that we end the school year as originally planned on June 15th due to the financial implications that we just can't afford the expense of it.
I'll second.
Ms. Ziem has made a motion that we keep the ending date the same. Ms. Ziem, could you speak a little about the financial impact that you're
Well, they told us that it was, we're required 180 days, and anything beyond that we have to pay. And it's not just one of the units, not just the teachers. It's the teachers, it's the janitors, it's the secretaries, and the paraprofessionals. So, and they all have to agree because that's the way our contracts are written. And so, if even one of them disagrees, one of the unions, then we can't do it. And so that would be one of the problems. But the financial thing is that every day over the 180, we're having to pay $300,000 is the figure that I remember. What was it?
I think you're right about the $300,000, but I believe that our contracts say pupil days.
Yes,
and
pupil days.
so were we to end early, we would have to pay staff under those contracts up to the 180th day anyways. And the 180th day is June 15th.
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes, it's June 15th. And I think what Mrs. Ziem is
Thank
saying
you.
is that we would have to pay them regardless of whether they're working or they're not working. And that could be a big financial implication here because of the fact that the contract states that we have to pay them. So I think that's, am I correct, Mrs. Ziem, basically
Yes.
what you're saying?
The part that I got confused is that we will not have made 180 days to make it less. And so for every day that we are less, it's going to cost us that $300,000.
Right.
And it adds up very, very quickly. And even if you ask yourself, how many computers could we buy with that money? I mean, we have so many financial needs in our district that to spend money to pay people not to work, it just doesn't make sense. I wish it did, but it doesn't. And so I'm sorry for the misunderstanding, but thank you for the correction.
Thank you. I have several hands. So I saw Miss Julie's hand go up first. Then I saw Mr. Norris. Then I saw Miss Bishop. Did I miss anybody else? I don't see anybody
Ms.
else.
Gilio.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, I don't see anybody else waving at me, so we'll go Miss Gilio, Mr. Norris, and then Miss Bishop.
Okay. I support that we continue to have school through the 15th of June. It's something I've supported the last three meetings when we've discussed it. And of course, there's a financial equation, but I also think based on the attendance data that we were given earlier in tonight's meeting, that still are a lot of students who are still engaged. It's in the 80 and 90% area. And I think for a lot of our students whose lives have been disrupted, they've developed a new way of going to school, a new way of meeting daily with their teachers, a new way of connecting with their classmates. And I think that this routine is important for them. And I also think that some of their activities could take place outside. You can always do a lot of science outside. PE can be outside. So I see absolutely no reason to end school before June 15th. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Gilio. Mr.
Thank you, Madam President. So I just have a question. I know we talked about at the last meeting about getting the 3 snow days forgiven. So this is before that happened. We can go back and change the end of school date if we were to get the last 3 days forgiven. Am I correct in saying that, or?
Yes, except if we did that, even if we asked the state to waive those 3 snow days, it's my understanding that we still have to pay all of our staff, well, all of our contracted staff for those 3 days. So we could waive them for the students, but not the staff. And then the staff would get, and it costs taxpayers about $300,000 to pay all our staff.
So one more question. So that extra money that we have to honor our contracts to the 180 days. So no matter what, we're going to have to pay the same amount of money, right? So no matter when we end, we still have to pay the same amount.
That's my understanding. Mr. Donovan, is that correct?
That is certainly the way the union would define the contract, yes.
Okay. All right. Any questions, Mr. Norris?
Nope, good.
Okay. Ms. Bishop?
2 things. The first one is, excuse me, the 15th allows for the most amount of pupil days to get us up to 180, which ensures that every worker continues to get paid. Because if we don't have pupils in class, then there's some contracts that would not be paid, which we don't want to do. We want to make sure everybody gets paid. And that means we keep kids in school a little bit longer than everybody wants to be right now, but we can't do everything. The other piece is going off of what Mr. Norris said about the 3 days of snow. There are some people who, I think it's the paras, who can use personal time when it's snow days. How does that factor in to, let's say, the last 3 days of school? Do they have to pay their personal days back? Or just what are the logistics about that? Because the paras use personal days when it's snow days. So will they, if somebody has to understand my question.
I did, in the para contract, the paras can use their personal days for snow days, but they only get 3 or 4, so they probably already used them during the school year. We had 3 snow days.
So if we go up to the end, the 15th, then they're not in a hole.
They
So it
probably
benefits
won't
them.
they are in a hole because they will not have personal days to use. Most of them already use them.
Right. So it's a good thing for them to go out to the 15th.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So everyone wins except the people that want to leave early.
Except everybody.
Right. So
everyone gets paid.
So there's been quite a bit of discussion, and we've received, I don't know, a dozen or so emails asking about hours and, with individuals having what they think is the calculation regarding hours. So I had asked the last meeting for Dr. Mosley to look into where we fall when it comes to hours, because I know that we have to end all levels of school on the same day. We can't let elementary out early and then keep going with middle school. So it was 990 hours. That was how many we needed to meet if we wanted to ask to switch to hours. What day does that bring us to? Did we figure that out? Oh, Dr. Mosley, you might be on mute. I think you're on mute, Dr. Mosley. Oh, he's pointing at Tara.
Oh.
Ms. Kinsella, sorry.
Okay. So I have two documents, one that shows our waiver request, if we I did a waiver request, and then I have another that brings us right out to the end, and I show that. I think it's more accurate.
Yeah, we can put that. It brings us out to, if we use that soft 990, that would bring us out to, I believe, June 9th, correct, Ms. Kinsella? That's what we calculated?
Yep. So if everyone can see this, this shows our early release days minused out of our total hours. It shows our 3 snow days minused out in the red. The yellow shows our subtotal. And the next column is our state minimum. So, and then the last column shows what we're over. So our or our middle schools are only 24 hours over by going 180 days. That would make it would equate to about 6 days.
Will that be published on the website? Can we put this chart on the website so people can see that?
I think it would go with the minutes because it's a document that went with this meeting.
Thank you.
And please keep in mind to the public that not all of our instructional times are the same. Just to kind of walk the public through this, at our elementary school, we have the highest amount of instructional time traditionally. At our middle schools, we have the least amount. And then second place is our high schools. It's just, so you have to calculate at the school level that has the least amount of time. In this case, it's our middle school.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Mosley. And just to be clear, if we were to end early, there's still the question of lunches, correct?
Lunches, summer schools start and finish, ESY services for special education students, and certainly yes.
Okay. Good. Does anyone else have any questions or comments? I can't see everyone while the screen is up. So if you could just kind of shout out if you have something to say, I would appreciate it.
Can we take the vote?
Yes, Ms. Timmons, we can take the vote. So I just want to say my heart is breaking for all of the families who are really struggling with remote learning. I had really hoped to provide people some relief because I know how difficult it is to have working parents and limited devices and kids who don't want to participate. This goes on about the challenges that we're all facing. So I don't know how to make it better right now, but I'm still thinking about it. So that's all I wanted to say. We can vote whenever you're ready, Mr. Guarino.
Okay, on the motion to end school year on June 15th as planned, Mr. Guarino votes yes. Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Ziem?
Yes.
Ms. Bishop?
Yes.
Ms. Gilio?
Yes.
Ms. Raymond?
No.
Ms. Brown?
No.
Ms. Oden?
No.
Ms. Timmons?
Yes.
Okay, I have 3 noes and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 yeses. The motion carries 6-3.
Thank you, Mr. Guarino. Ms. Ziem?
I would just like to add that your sentiments, I couldn't have said it better myself. If there were any way that we could afford to do it, obviously it makes sense, but we are bound. There's just no way I can see us doing it for the money. So I don't want people to think that that was a careless vote. It was not. If there was any way that I could see that we could do it without costing the district money that we don't have, I would certainly have done it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Ms. Ziem. Mr. Guarino?
I just wanted to say it's not always about the money. It's about the message we send to our students. It's about perseverance. It's about working hard and overcoming obstacles and difficult times. And I think we send the message to our kids, keep at it, and we're going to come out stronger in the end because of it. So it's not just about the money; it's about hanging in there and working hard and getting through it. I just wanted to add that too. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Guarino. Does anybody have anything else?
Motion to adjourn.
Fantastic. Does we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Motion to adjourn, Ms. Ziem, seconded by Mr. Guarino.
On the motion to adjourn, Mr. Guarino votes yes. Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Ziem?
Yes.
Ms. Bishop?
Yes.
Ms. Gilio?
Yes.
Ms. Raymond?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Oden?
Yes.
Ms. Timmons? Motion carries 9-0. We are adjourned at 7:47 p.m.
Great. Thank you all so much for coming this evening.